the team that I'm going with, who I know you guys both thought of for this, and that, of course, is the St. Louis Blues. And so we get the Penguins, who have lost 7 straight, and we get the St. Louis Blues, who have lost 6 in a row after going 3-0 to start the season. So 3-6 out of the gate. They've lost 6 in a row, as I mentioned. Again, no surprise from me. No fancy analytical stats or whatever from me. But again, just looking at the lack of production from some key guys, kind of going back to what we were saying about a lot of the key guys in Nashville. Ryan O'Reilly, this is a contract year for him. He's got 1 point in 9 games to start the season. Jordan Kyrou just signed that big 8-year deal at over $8 million per season this past summer. He's got 3 goals in 9 games to start. Ivan Barbashev, 1 goal in 9 games to start the season after a breakout year for him. Colton Parayko, one of the guys that they really count on the blue line, 2 assists in the first 9 games, and then Jordan Binnington, 3 and 4 out of the gate with an .897 save percentage. So there's a lack of production here from some key guys on the Blues, and again with the goaltending, I really have some questions, because you look at Ville Husso, who they decided to let go in the offseason. He goes to Detroit, and Detroit is, they've kind of been up and down to start the season, but they've got a good record, and they look like they're going to be in the race. And then you bring in Thomas Greiss, who's an older veteran backup, but you're really going back to Binnington as the guy, like he was in the 2019 Stanley Cup Final against the Bruins. And again, Binnington just kind of showing early on his regular season struggles, and you hope that this team can turn it around and be a playoff team like we all expect them to be, and that Binnington can really shine in the postseason. But this was a question going in with Binnington, is what kind of goaltender are we going to see? Are we going to see the playoff Jordan Binnington, or the one who's kind of up and down in the regular season? And beyond him, they have Thomas Greiss and Joel Hofer, who's still a young guy who's developing. So the goaltending, definitely a bit of a concern for me. Again, for a guy like Ryan O'Reilly, this is a big year for him. He's looking for a big extension in St. Louis. There have been some talks, but I mean that number's not going to be bigger than the 7.5 that he's making right now if this lack of production continues. And the other point that I want to say about the Blues that I heard from Elliot Friedman that I think is a really good point, and it kind of contradicts what we were talking about in person when we were in Toronto a couple of weeks ago, that this team is built like a playoff team. And I think that what Elliot was saying that I think is true is that they've kind of lost some guys that brought that identity and helped them win that Stanley Cup in 2019, and they've lost some of that size and grit that they had. On the back end, obviously, Pietrangelo is the one that sticks out like a sore thumb. Jay Bouwmeester obviously retired, and then with the forward group, you had guys like Maroon and Sundqvist, who's a good player now in Detroit. So I think that I would have to agree with Elliot in saying that this team is, I think, they're just a little bit lost right now, and the identity of the team has sort of been turned over to the guys with speed and skill, like a Robert Thomas, a Jordan Kyrou, a Jake Neighbors eventually, we think. And so I think this team is just a little bit lost right now, and they're looking to bounce back and get a win tonight against the Boston Bruins, against former assistant coach Jim Montgomery, and just get this thing back on the rails. But definitely some concerns with the Blues. I do expect them to be a playoff team, but it hasn't started out well for them since starting off 3-0. So a lot of rambling there on the Blues, but what do you guys think?
Oh man, if you couple what Elliot Friedman was saying with my eye test of this team, it doesn't look good, because if you're saying they've lost the gritty guys and that they've switched to speed, well, in my 4 periods, let's keep that in mind, 4 periods of watching the Blues this year, I thought that this team was skating in quicksand. They seemed so slow. The game was such a slow pace. And that was, 2 of those periods was them playing against Edmonton. And I was like, man, why is this game look like in slow motion? So that's a scary thought. And if you told me at 9 games in that Justin Falk would be leading this team in points, I would have been flabbergasted at that. But it's funny, I did look up because I was curious at where Pittsburgh's landed on the PDO stat. That's what it is, not PLDO. PDO stat of save percentage plus shooting percentage. Pittsburgh's a little more in the middle than I thought they would be, but I'll tell you, he was in the bottom of the league for that stat, and that's the St. Louis Blues at .954, and that's tough. That hurts. That means things are just not going your way at all. And to kind of prove that stat isn't just skewed towards the bad teams in the league, here's a couple notable teams down in the bottom 10. There's the Minnesota Wild, the New York Rangers, the New Jersey Devils, Calgary Flames, and Carolina Hurricanes are all in the bottom 10 for PDO. So that tells me that it's not just a stat that correlates with the bottom teams in the league. And St. Louis is struggling here. The puck is not going in, and the puck is not being saved.
There's not much else to add on the Blues here, especially because I dropped out for like a minute or two. I don't know if you guys saw that. Maybe it wasn't that long, but I'm back now. It's because I was trying to do too much shit on my computer, streaming this on Twitch, doing tests and whatnot. But for the Blues, I just wanted to say, don't you think they miss David Perron right now? That was like the biggest head scratcher to me in the offseason. Aside from Husso, which to me, I got that move because they didn't want to pay 2 goalies, $10 million combined or whatever it would have worked out to, which fair enough. That's a money decision. But you're telling me you couldn't get David Perron to come back for 3.5 or something and made the money work when he was a heart and soul guy for you for the last how many years? And then Case, we watched him in overtime the other night score or make a perfect tape-to-tape pass to Kubalik on the back door, and we were just pumped. That was immediately what I thought of, because I had Perron in fantasy last year, and he was a horse. He was great. And I was like, listen, they are probably missing this guy right now, and it seems like they are, because they've got off to a terrible, terrible start. But, Case, the PDO stat, that being, that will probably work in their favor as the season goes on. They'll get luckier. They'll start burying their chances. And, so I'm not overly worried. I still think they're a good team. They're going to have to prove it pretty soon because, Harp, like you mentioned, American Thanksgiving is coming up. They've got another, whatever it is, 10 games or so until then. And, they've got to start figuring things out like the other teams we talked about in this episode too.
And we've seen this before with the St. Louis Blues, right? Who could forget, in January, they were dead last in the NHL that year that they won the Stanley Cup. And, a lot of reports out there say that Doug Armstrong was pretty close to saying, all right, that's it. I'm going to tear things down, and we're going to start over. He decided to hang on to his guys, and they went on to win the Stanley Cup. But, that's a great point about David Perron, Chad. I didn't mention him, but he goes to Detroit in the offseason, and that's a big loss for sure. He was a big part of their identity. Not only could he, or can he rather, put the puck in the back of the net and show some offensive abilities, but he is one of those heart and soul guys for sure. So losing him and Pietrangelo in the last couple of off seasons here, those are really big losses from your Stanley Cup winning team. I mentioned some of the other guys lower down the scale, the Sundqvists, the Maroons, the Bouwmeesters, and so on. And now it makes me wonder what's going to happen with Ryan O'Reilly and or Vladimir Tarasenko as well. if things don't get back on track here. But it's just been weird because even when things have been good and this team has been good, they've just the deck has been shuffled, and especially going back to the Pietrangelo thing, it's like, you know, Marco Scandella, when they acquired him a couple of years ago, he got an extension right away and now is out, and that contract hasn't really worked out for them, and they couldn't come together with Pietrangelo on a deal, and so there's been some odd business practices with the Blues, that's for sure, and so it may be coming back to bite them right now, although I agree. I think that this team will be fine, and that they'll be in the race at least, if not in a playoff spot.
Well, if they do start to tear things down and look to trade Tarasenko again, I talked about a team in their division who's looking for a right wing.
Yeah,
Bring it
there
full
you
circle
go.
for you.
I thought you were going to say the Devils because he was linked to them
same.
forever.
No, we don't want that.
Yeah, and you know, how funny is it, Case, that, I mean, this is Devils related, this isn't about the Blues, but how funny is it that Johnny Gaudreau had the chance to go play for the Devils for the next 7 years, and now he's in Ohio and they suck. Like, it's just funny. Yeah,
It was pretty great to beat them 7-1 and hold him to one shot, and then John Marino scores Johnny Hockey. It's like,
yeah,
that was sweet.
That was pretty cool. Last thing I want to say about the Blues is that, you know, Harp, you mentioned that last week in fantasy you played my buddy Connor Coe from Osgood, and he's a big St. Louis fan. I don't know if you guys knew that or not, but he's a big St. Louis fan. So in the offseason, we talked quite a bit about some of the moves that they made. He was upset that they lost Perron, and he was equally upset that they signed Leddy to that big ticket, because right there, like, that's a 1-for-1 deal, or a 1-for-1 swap basically for their money. So, like, you can't tell me you couldn't have made that work when, you know, you're signing Nick Leddy, who, you know, is a serviceable defenseman, but he's not a point per game forward heart and soul guy like David Perron can be, and we've seen him be in the past. So interesting moves there for sure, and just, you know, kind of weirded out at some of them, and they're kind of paying for them right now as well.